was thinking about in your book on the purpose gap, you talk a lot about world building tools. And one of the organizers, young organizers last night was asking, what's the connection between reparations and decolonization? Are they linked together? Are they a separate process? Is that a part of building a new world? If so, how's it play out?
Yeah, it's a great question.
The stolen land and the stolen people and reparations are owed, but what does that look like and what does it mean?
That's absolutely right. I mean, I think those, they're not the same. Let me just say that. They're completely different mechanisms, thoughts, theories that kind of undergird them and different historical places in which they arise. But I would say that those are tools that we should be thinking about collectively as we build coalitions across different. So when I'm thinking about decolonization is one tool, but it's not the tool that's going to get us to freedom or liberation. It's one of those many mechanisms that has been helpful for us to undo the way that we've thought about colonization. There's this concept in decolonial theory called coloniality, which is this idea that even though colonization, like the formal period of colonization may be over, which it's not in this world, but just imagine a world where it might be over, that the remnants of colonization still exist. Coca-Cola might still exist. The way that we exploit the land, if I'm thinking about where I came from, the agricultural land, and abuse it for monocultures, these kind of markers of colonization are still going to be with us. And we have to reimagine. Decolonization means, if there's, like out here in the Southwest, there used to be 23 different varieties of corn. Now we only do 3.
Yeah.
And most people only think about the ones that come in the bag, the red, blue, and yellow corn, maybe white corn, maybe we get 4 in there. But if we think about how do we redo this work, how do we reimagine it, decolonization is one way that we might get there. Reparations is, tied to a very historical marker in the United States around slavery, enslaved humans. And how do we think about doing that work well in ways that this country in particular, lawmakers and industry doesn't want to pay, doesn't want to account for stolen lives. And I think
I'm in Tennessee. At least you're in New Mexico.
That's right. And these things need to go side by side. And yeah.
So in the purpose gap, you were talking about not a single day goes by in which whiteness, patriarchy, and colonization do not affect my life. How do you survive that? What keeps you hopeful in the daily onslaught?
Yeah.
Salt.
It's that's also like an admission. It's not just that it happens to me, that I see it happening through me. When I see ways in which my own formation in this American education system and my own family structures and all this stuff where patriarchy or colonization makes me my worst self, where I'm, pushing for work, like work becomes primary, and I see the brokenness on my kids' faces when they're looking at me and they just want to spend some time with me, and I'm like, I gotta bust out this last email, or this issue's really come up over you. Like that's the disease of these systems kind of manifesting themselves in me. So that quote's both an admission of my own guilt, in the ways that it affects me, but also just to say that, when I see Amazon delivery truck in my neighborhood, when I read another report that there's no more water in the river, that these are things I'm participating in because I'm not actively engaged in the work to reimagine how we might build local economies that imagine that. So part of that survival is, the kind of not trying to go numb to it, not just turn on another video game or TV and, binge watching something to forget it, but actually thinking about, this moment that we're in right now, the season we're in, the butterflies are starting to migrate here. And that's a representation of our ancestors. So what does it mean to take my kids out into our backyard and make sure we tend to the butterfly garden so that way our ancestors who are coming to visit us have a place to land and nourish themselves before they continue on in their journey? That's life-giving work. That's the type of how I might heal from or survive all those things, is by finding beauty and joy in the work that actually repairs the world, or the world I want to see.
Oh, I was going to ask about the role of music, art, stories in both healing and this world building, in reimagining, and what you think, particularly white European folks in this country might learn from The art, the stories, the music, the dance, the potlucks, the traditions. But then where does that hit a line of, like there's a lot of white folks who have gone into restorative justice, and it really just looks ugly. It becomes one more form of white supremacy, while the whole time saying, oh, we're doing this ancient tradition from indigenous people. Or folks who take a tiny piece of a culture tradition and say, ta-da, now I am embodying whatever I've just stolen from another culture. So where's the line about learning from and with and taking, stealing, pretending as if you have been shaped by, when really all you're doing is pulling the thread? That's kind of a scattered question, but I bet you know what I'm talking about.
It's a great question. I think part of it for me is honoring, I don't know what it is, the colonial mindset that I can sit in, circle, or I can be with folks from a different culture. And the colonial mindset is what I just experienced, I can take elsewhere as my story or as part of what I've learned. I think about it in terms of like artifacts. It is, I got indigenous art all around me because that's my family. It's where we're from. It's got representation of all this. This artifact right behind me is made by some indigenous weavers in Mexico, and purchasing, buying the art craft, by supporting their livelihood, by participating, getting to know those artists. That's an important part of building community and honoring their tradition. If I came on this call and said, look, we're all going to make some indigenous textiles together from these conversations I had, and you're going to pay me to train you on how to do this, this, that's part of the thing. Like it's that like sense of honoring someone else's tradition, valuing them enough to say, hey, I say this as a joke, but anyone who's gone through education in the United States, you go through K through 12 in a public school or even a private school, you're learning a white Western history. You go to grad school, you're learning a white Western way of being. And if you're doing a PhD, you're learning a white Western way of thinking and propagating that. And if I have to go into education debt to near six figures, if you're a student of color, if you're going through all those layers, why can't white folks go into that much debt to learn from my people? I think like there's a value exchange here that's just not being made, that is part of that colonial mindset that I can go and appropriate for free from people of color because their sacred knowledge isn't worth the same dollars and cents that mine is. And that to me is just, it's bargaining in bad faith. It's old school United States treaties. It's just another expression of that sort of thing. Like, I'm going to devalue what you're doing because what matters is actually how I'm interpreting and seeing the world. And so I just invite people in to think about that. Like, how are you really building partnerships and communities with folks who do the work? How are you honoring their work? How are you supporting their work to do that even better, or to share it with the next generation, and teaching your people to do the same, to honor that as well?